Pharma faces many challenges. Overcoming them requires a coordinated effort between science and technology. With a clear, bold vision, we will accelerate drug discovery and development and empower our industry to conquer current and future challenges. The collaboration of science and engineering will have an extraordinary impact, enabling life sciences to bring safe and effective treatments to patients sooner.
Hi, I'm Greg Simpson, Vice President and Head of Marketing at Saama Technologies. At Saama, we're committed to bringing great scientific minds and great engineering minds together to raise the bar in the life sciences industry. It's this type of collaboration that will advance clinical research and bring treatments to patients sooner. Saama is thrilled to be part of the 2020 PharmaVOICE 100 celebration. Our panel, Will Science Ever Marry Tech?, will explore the importance of collaboration between science and technology to improve human health. It's my pleasure to congratulate all of the PharmaVOICE 100 honorees from this year as well as past years, and thank them for their contributions to our industry. These honorees include Saama's very own Sagar Anisingaraju and Suresh Kaata, who joined today's panel. Now, I am pleased to hand it over to Taren and the panel.
Thanks, Greg, for that great introduction, and thanks to our sponsor, Saama Technologies. I'm going to have our panel facilitator, Dan Limbach, and introduce our esteemed panel. Dan, over to you.
We're very excited to have such an esteemed group of panelists to discuss the importance of science and technology living in harmony. So let's meet our panelists. Suresh Kaata is a 2018 PharmaVOICE 100 honoree. Under his stewardship, Saama harnesses and applies the power of artificial intelligence and deep learning to its proprietary analytics platform. He's joined by Sagar Anisingaraju, a 2020 PharmaVOICE 100, who is driving the concepts, business models, and development of the company's innovative analytics solutions. He's also the author of the newly released book, Kuchela.ai. We also have Elliot Barnathan, MD, a 2020 PharmaVOICE 100. He's been working with regulators, public health organizations, and specialty societies to ensure the best care for patients affected by the coronavirus. His pharmaceutical research career has spanned a range of diseases in cardiology, immunology, and pulmonology. Jay Kaminski is partnering with the AMA to transform healthcare at the system level. In addition, he is adept at shaping strategy, driving execution while nurturing culture, and is passionate at bringing innovative therapeutics to enhance the lives of patients. And finally, Clive Meanwell, MD, Ph.D., a 2016 PharmaVOICE 100. Clive is a pharmaceutical and biotechnology executive committed to authentic innovation. For more information about our thought leaders, you can see that at pharmavoice100.com, but don't go anywhere yet. This session is moderated by Taren Grom, editor of PharmaVOICE. Taren, take it away.
Dan, thanks so much. This is an exciting panel with 5 great thought leaders, and we're going to try to cover a lot of ground in the next 40 minutes or so. The value of collaboration between the great scientific minds of pharma and the great engineering minds of the analytics industry, especially as related to the pandemic and beyond, are vast. One of the biggest potential benefits is the creation of a global clinical neural network that would accelerate COVID-19 therapies as well as drugs for other diseases. So today we're going to discuss the greatest challenges facing drug development programs today. How can advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence help overcome these challenges? How sharing research can be expanded and what steps should be taken for technology to enable the process. So we're going to get started right out of the bat. I mean, I wasn't kidding that this is a robust panel. And to keep it interesting, let's mix up our thought leaders to present a scientist, technologist, point counterpoint. So, Elliot, I turn to you first. What are the greatest challenges facing drug development today?
Thanks very much, Taren. Normally, when I'm asked that question, I usually say things like the size of the programs, the cost, the complexity of startup, the lack of generalizability, et cetera. Now, I have to say it's COVID-19. It's essentially put a halt to drug development, essentially worldwide, because of the pandemic. but it also created an opportunity. And so when we all went into hiding, we kept saying, what is it that we can do to help? And the first thing I did is I went to my folks who are the EMR specialists who use real world evidence. And I said, can we use real world evidence to understand more about COVID? And they said, no, there's a 6-month delay. And 6 months ago, there was no COVID. So that was out. So then we went to real-time prospective registries. And I said, well, that's good, but unfortunately, that's not going to help us in drug development, because in reality, you have to be able to randomize. I said, but is there any way that we could marry randomization with real world evidence? And so we actually put together a program to use EMR data, but to randomize. So essentially do a pragmatic trial in COVID. And the last 4 months has essentially been figuring out how challenging it is. And the lack of standardization is one of the things using EMR data. But the experiment that we have going right now is a large phase 3 pragmatic clinical trial where we're marrying the ability to evaluate standard technology with EMR real world evidence. And that's the biggest challenge right now, but I think it's a tremendous opportunity moving forward.
That's excellent. Now I'm going to go to one of our esteemed technologists. Sagar, you're on the hot seat.
So Taren, thanks. There are probably many challenges, but I'll probably highlight a couple of them from my perspective. As Elliot said, number one will be speed, and the second is change management. Let me elaborate both. The pandemic and the post-pandemic environment is already putting an extremely intense lens on the traditional methods and speed with which clinical operations are getting conducted. So we need to radically change that. The existing methods will not do, right? So the speed of operations, clinical operations, accelerating it fast, safe, and effective is the number one challenge, I would say. Second is change management, right? In recent years, tremendous advances have happened in both science and technology, right? But how do we adapt them? How do we integrate them? How do you unlearn the old methods? How do you learn? How do you reskill and upskill your SMEs and employees, whether it is from drug discovery to clinical planning to conduct to real-world evidence-based observational studies? Tremendous technical advances have happened, but incorporating them and managing the change effectively is one of the biggest challenges that pharma is facing today.
Excellent. So change management, because change is never easy, right? So Jay, because I understand you have a foot in both worlds, I'd love to hear your take.
I had the fortunate opportunity to run global clinical operations for Celgene Corporation for 6 years, managing around 200 or 250 projects. And in that role, we were pushing technology and innovation across the board, and particularly in the clinical operations space, and really working with Saama to accelerate some of these opportunities. And really what Sagar is saying is this whole change management of adoption of technology to accelerate kind of jobs and roles that people have done for years and years and years is very, very hard. And people are concerned about their jobs when they adopt technology. I think one of the things that COVID has enabled in a kind of a strange sort of way is that many things can be done remotely using technology. We do it with banking. We do it just with socialization. We do it with ordering groceries. And it's never been really adopted into the clinical operations space. And now we have virtual office visits. Not everything can be done away, but utilizing some of these technologies, whether they're artificial intelligence, cognitive learning, all of these things can be applied to this space. And I think now is the time to actually embrace and accelerate that in the clinical operations space.
Excellent. And Clive, I'm going to call on you as our next scientist to address this issue.
Well, I see speed and the joint efforts of engineers and health scientists actually happening in an exciting way right now. The problem is both of us, if you like, as constituents, are sitting in a civic and political environment which making life a little more complicated than we wish. Trust building with patients, with caregivers, with providers, with regulators is at a premium right now because no one trusts anything. The competence, the consistency, the transparency, the mutuality has been hard to sustain in a tricky civic and political environment worldwide. Two quick stories, very brief. It's not well known that Napoleon, during the height of the European conflict, inoculated his entire army with the Edward Jenner vaccine for smallpox. Not only did he do that at a time when France and England were in tremendous conflict, but he also struck a medal in honor of Edward Jenner and awarded it to him in absentia. Edward Jenner then wrote a letter to Napoleon thanking him for the award and asking him to release 3 friends of his who were prisoners in France, and he did. That's a level of civic and political openness that allows innovation to happen within it. And I think our voice as scientists and engineers needs to be loud and clear to politicians and civic leaders that we expect that kind of running room and they should cut the crap.
All right, I like it. So Suresh, I hope we don't have to wait as long as go back to Napoleon days to realize the same results. I'm going to let you close out this section for us.
Okay, thank you, Taren. Thank you, PharmaVOICE team, for giving this opportunity for us to participate in a very creative 24-hour marathon PV100 celebration. Congratulations to all of you.
Thank you.
Look, in my opinion, the great challenge is traditional drug development is stuck with a 3-decade-old mindset. Organizations are stuck with one-size-fits-all clinical development mindset. I had the privilege of getting to know some of the best scientific minds in the pharma industry. I learned to respect the challenges they faced with the science, risks they have taken. There have been a great deal of progress made, no doubt about it. However, the current operating procedures, and like Jay mentioned and Elliot mentioned, even my colleague mentioned, along with the people outside of science, I'm going to point out this, outside of science, have been risk covers. Further, culture does not promote agility nor apply modern technologies. Look at distinct areas like from the time clinical planning starts, study planning starts, to all the way to submission. We are producing, or let me say this, we are actually applying suboptimal technologies that are producing inconclusive processes as well as results more often than required. So as a result, what has happened is over these 3 decades, it is taking much longer for us to conduct a successful clinical study, as well as costing us a lot more money. Our collective change in mindset can overcome many of these human-made challenges.
I think those are excellent points. And you say, suboptimal technologies, but Suresh, what can change? What needs to happen to make this change? And then we'll jump to our poll. Look,
there has been a lot of innovation that has happened over the last decade. We need to apply these technologies into our existing age-old processes.
Excellent. Dan, we do have a poll, so we're going to get the audience involved here. So if you could please launch for me, that would be great.
There we go. So we'd like to know, what are the challenges to be overcome in marrying science and technology for drug development? And you're going to pick one of these. Is it collaboration of minds, common understanding of data, process reengineering, or all of the above? Let's close it down and share the results. So not surprising, all of the above got the most, but collaboration of minds was a strong second place.
Excellent. So, I would turn back to, Suresh, do these results surprise you?
Not at all. No, not at all. Maybe I would say process reengineering, I did not expect 0.
Fair enough. So we're on to our next section, and let's talk about some of the advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence. How can these help overcome the challenges that you all just identified? And this time I'm going to lead back with you, Suresh. We're going to start with the technology end of this equation.
Look, like I just said, extreme amount of innovation happened over the past decade with AI technologies. Many industry verticals have successfully adapted a bunch of these technologies while re-engineering their business processes. Okay. You, me, even our grandmas can feel the impact of that in our daily lives today. While shopping, AI is telling us what else to buy. While listening to music, AI is telling us what else to listen to. While watching something, AI is telling us, you got my point. It is telling us what else to watch. Similarly, there is a real opportunity to embed AI in every aspect of clinical development. From the time you define the protocol all the way to submission, we can clearly see hundreds of different applications of AI. And my favorite example, if I could give, traditionally it takes months to get a database lock done. Once you have that last patient, last visit is done. With our technologies, we were able to demonstrate ability to get a database lock done in hours to days. So think about the amount of savings of money per day, hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars, depending on how big or how small biotech or big pharma you are. And more importantly, think about patients then who can get a treatment faster or sooner because drug is in the market faster in the market. And last thing is, my colleagues in pharma industry would love it. That is, they can be making more money if they get into the market faster.
I think we can all agree more money is better, is good, but also considering those other considerations of safety and about the patient too. So all of that's fantastic. So thank you for those great insights. Clive, I'm going to turn to you now. So let's talk about, as Suresh was talking about, how can AI help overcome some of the challenges that you addressed? And I don't think Napoleon had AI back in the day. So
He had plenty of I, but not much A. Okay, I think this, you know, I agree with Suresh that the applications are myriad. I'll give three quick examples. First of all, it's pretty obvious that the patterns of information we use to recruit patients into trials have to go beyond their obvious medical symptoms and signs. Those of us who were trained classically in medicine know that those are, it's one way of describing a patient, but there are so many other social and other determinants of patient risk and outcome likelihood that we should be building those into patient selection trials, and AI can help with that. The second thing is in the clinical operations arena where, and actually I've discussed this with Suresh before, where our ability to move from clinical trial concept to a high quality set of documents, training materials, and actionable, you know, written information is far too slow and could be done much more quickly and much more simultaneously. And the extra nights and weekends that the COVID teams have been working shows that humanly that can be done. If we apply AI tools, we can make that routine rather than exceptional superhuman effort. And the third area I'd like to highlight is the possibility of what I would call a patient-specific, individualized consent process. Patients coming into trials are not all the same, particularly if you take into account their social circumstances and their predilection for things in life. You may want to build a consent form that is as informative as possible to that individual. And that may change depending on who we are. Elliot and I may have a different need for information, and it would be great if we could use AI to give each of us a consent form or a consent tool, could even be a cartoon for all I care, that fulfills the ethical and scientific standards we need, but is really tailored for the individual patient. That would be very cool, I think.
Excellent. And what's stopping that from happening? I have to ask.
Suresh hasn't programmed it yet.
There we go. So now you have another job to do.
Yeah.
Jay, and again, I'm going to put you right in the middle since you have worked on both sides of the aisle here. So.
Oh, no, thank you. I mean, I agree with the comments that Suresh and Clive had started so far. You know, the drug development timeline for a product bringing to market, people know the statistics, 12 to 14 years. Half of that time is the operational pieces, which is getting a trial up and running, getting people enrolled, closing out, and analyzing the data. And literally, you could take that time and have using some of these technologies through operationalizing things, retraining people, and then prospectively putting artificial intelligence, cognitive learning, and machine learning across every continuum of the operation. What that would enable to do would be to have the systems prospectively do interventions along the way where people weren't going back and trying to figure out where a trial went wrong. And what I mean by that, we were working with Saama at my previous company to actually build in artificial intelligence and bots around the clinical trials. So when a study manager would come in every morning, the bot would tell the study manager what to look at and the anomalies that were done overnight. This is done in the financial industry. It's done in the consumer goods industry. As Suresh just mentioned, you know, Alexa does this on what we listen to and what we watch. And you could put all of that technology through every aspect of the operation. What that would entail is obviously, as Sagar said, is retraining of people where they're not doing what they used to do, but they're prospectively doing intervention and managing the program while interventions are done in real time. What that'll give you is a faster trial, cleaner data set, and a closeout of a trial much more efficiently. And that technology is available today. We just need to apply it in this space.
Excellent. And just as an aside, when you said Alexa, my Alexa answered. So I apologize if you heard that come on. Elliot, let's get your opinion. So, you know, Clive mentioned that we can go, COVID study teams are doing this very rapidly. Is this something that can be now applied to the broader spectrum of diseases that we have to look at beyond COVID?
Yeah, the example I have in front of me right this minute is COVID, and so I'll just use that. We did look and collaborated with a company that was using AI to pull EMR data from that had it readily accessible with COVID patients, and was actually able to identify a rate of venous thromboembolism, arterial thromboembolism in these patients, which was relatively small, but because of the power of the large database sample size, they were able to come up with a pretty good point estimate. And the thing is that for a normal clinical trial for an approval, you know, that type of AI as an endpoint right now would not be acceptable. And so to make the advance, we need to be able to validate whether a standard clinical trial with standard clinical data could be validated by an AI. And so what we're running right now is an experiment where we're actually collecting that type of EMR data. We could then apply AI and get the endpoints, but we also have the endpoints being adjudicated at the site virtually by qualified investigators who have EMR data to look at and report that back to us in a more standard ECRF type format. So my hope would be in the future that we'll be able to utilize EMR data directly without and get rid of the CECs and all the, you know, the adjudication committees. But we have to be able to prove that and then allow the FDA and other regulators around the world to agree with us. I just actually listened to an FDA panel at noon today where they were talking about real world evidence, and there's a lot of interest in doing it. I think the biggest single challenge is just standardization. I don't know if you remember, any of you are probably too young to remember before HDTV, but my uncle was, and it doesn't go back to Napoleon, but essentially the one thing that prevented high definition TV was the inability to have all the makers agree on standardization. But once they all agreed that if you could have a standard language that everybody would talk the same, then all of a sudden HDTV exploded and became available to everybody. And I think the same thing needs to occur for EMR data. Once we come to a standardization, then the utilization of that is going to be a rapid exponential explosion. I think drug development is going to change fundamentally.
And if I could just to elaborate on that for one moment, standardization plagues clinical operations in general across the industry. The industry doesn't understand what is pre-competitive versus what is truly competitive. And I think because of that, everybody views, or each sponsor views their own process as competitive. And I would argue it's not competitive. The industry should get together and use standards like the banking industry and others. And once that is standardized, then all boats will rise with acceleration. So I do think that's critical.
I totally agree with that. And we were part of Transcelerate, which was an organization across pharma to actually help to bring standardization in a pre-competitive space. In fact, we did some of the original development on data modules, to be CDISC compatible with FDA. So I totally agree with that.
And I think they did a great job. I think you could go much further, as you probably would agree.
Absolutely.
And do we think that at this point that, because there's greater collaboration now because being forced by COVID, that we might see some bigger leaps?
I think what everybody has recognized is that you can move faster. You just don't accept even a one-day delay when people are dying every day. And I think that reapplication of intensity and urgency for patients. Our founder, our namesake, Paul Janssen, said the patients are waiting. And I think COVID has re-intensified how important that is. And we've seen what's able to be done. Now everybody's worried when we go back to the old way, no longer are people gonna be able to say, oh, it can't be done, because it can.
It's an interesting point. I think our tech colleagues could probably help us with that, because the tech companies seem to be adept at some areas of their business as open source collaboration, which they all accelerate on, and Saama will work with other technology companies. Then they all have a proprietary piece that they differentiate in their own business model. And again, applying it back to pharmaceutical, everything is proprietary. It doesn't matter if it's the employment agreement or the logo or the colors or everything. And I think if we get to some kind of collaborative approach where we have some open source, even if it's bringing patients together, and if they don't come into a J&J trial, they go into a Moderna trial or a Merck trial, that you're still not all in swim lanes, but somehow collaborating together and then applying the technology where ultimately patients in healthcare can really take advantage of the benefit of the power.
Let's hope that's our future. Now, Sagar, I want to turn to you because I know AI is an area near and dear to your heart. So I'm going to leave you the last word on this section of this topic.
Sure. So Taren, I agree with especially the standardization aspect that Elliot brought up and Jay covered. I'll touch upon that. But at a broad level, if you see where your question is, where can AI actually make a difference and help reduce the challenges that the industry is facing? I kind of look at them as into three distinct areas. I call them connect, context, and converse. Let me elaborate. In connect, most of the time, what you're seeing pharma is for my study, what data sets I need to connect with and what I need to ingest it, different sources, different databases, different diversity, they're not clean. I need to map them into my internal standards and map them into external standards, SDTM, ADAM, TLG. So in the traditional rule-based process, what we are seeing is they're error-prone, manual intensive, and results are not guaranteed, and they're kind of linearly dependent on expertise of people. So that actually we felt is a very, very low-hanging fruit, where today's AI technology can learn those things. We have effectively, by teaching machines over 300 million odd data points, we are actually able to kind of learn those patterns and tremendously reduce and inculcate repeatability into both data ingestion as well as standardization. And standardization does not mean necessarily industry standardization. Every company, every pharma, as Elliot said, hey, it's my study, I have my own standards, right? Whatever I want to call it. We can learn, machines can now learn those internal standards and then map them into external standards, right? So that's kind of a low-hanging fruit in the connect area. Second is a context area. I mean, again, in a traditional methods in the last 15 years or so, what we are seeing, a lot of dashboards, a lot of reports, a lot of metrics. If you do all these 100 things correctly, your study will be successful, right? That's been very hard. I mean, everybody is very busy these days. I mean, Elliot, in your day in life, if there are two metrics that are most relevant for you, right? If machine is able to understand the context, seeing your surrounding environment, and actually show only those two, and generate those outcomes for you, that'll be much more interesting than anything else. And today, AI-based systems with intent learning can do that part. So that's a second area of where AI can reduce the challenge. Third is about the conversational ability of humans to machines, right? I mean, in the consumer life, we are interacting with our data sets. We don't write queries to ask questions, right? We just use natural language and then get answers. Why can't clinical data be any different? I mean, we can do the same thing. You don't need a complex biostat programmer to write a report for you. Can I ask a simple question and get very complex answers computed at the back, learn my intent and answer. So these are the three areas where connect, context, and converse. In these categories, of course, there are a lot of other application areas, but within these parameters or paradigm, we are seeing a lot of low-hanging fruit that is happening across pharma spectrum.
I think those 3 C's are really succinct encapsulations of where we can go and how AI can really help the industry move forward. So thank you so much for that. And it brings us to our next poll question. So I'm going to ask Dan to launch it. And this goes back to one of Suresh's earlier comments. And it's about embedding AI into your drug development programs. If we can embed AI into other things, can AI be embedded into drug development programs? So Dan, sorry, I took over your job. Look at how I got.
Thank you.
There.
You're more than welcome. Okay, the results are in. Let's see what we have. So 63% have not embedded AI into their drug dev programs. That's pretty telling.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's surprised by that, are you? Tell me if you're surprised by that on the panel.
No.
No. And I think it just shows that there's a lot of work left to be done, and there's a lot of opportunity to be had, I think. That's the biggest thing I'm reading from that. Am I wrong? What else can we read into that?
So maybe, Taren, if I can react to that poll question, while it's not surprising to see, there is always an element of suspicion or kind of disbelief in, hey, what can AI do for me kind of things, right? Somebody actually made a very interesting remark, one of the pharma executives, and he was giving a seminar on AI, and somebody asked him, hey, the AI models are only doing 80% accuracy. How can I believe them? I need 100%. I said, my friend, come and join my team. My own people, experts, are not giving me 80% accuracy every time, right? And we live with it. Why should we hold a machine to be higher order when I'm allowing my own people to fail and do mistakes and learn? Why can't I allow my machine to do that? So you need certain thought leaders, and then of course, not everybody will be like that. Some people would like to follow, and forums like this probably is a good change agent as well.
I think the other thing, Sagar, and a question for you and Suresh is, where do you think the best entry point is for companies that want the proof of concept? When the term AI is, people, as you said, get a little overwhelmed. So where is the best entry point where you can build confidence and then bring it all across the entire continuum from what you've seen so far?
Jay, this is what I would say. There are a bunch of, like my colleague Sagar said, in these 3 C's, connect and contextualize and converse. That each one of them have some low-hanging fruits. There is nothing wrong for you to speak to your Alexa and say, how is temperature today, right? Maybe it got it wrong today because it understood you are not in New Jersey, somewhere else for some reason. But it eventually will get the context right, contextualize. Then same way it is able to connect with the right data sets to get it. So my suggestion is some of these low-hanging fruits, speak to your data. If you can ask among my COVID-19 clinical trials, which is the one study I should be most concerned about? That's a very common thing as I get up. If If I was Elliot, probably I would be asking that question every morning as I get up. So I feel that a technology is available. It is not going to kill you by asking that question. But same time, you're going to teach the deep learning algorithms how to train themselves to answer this correctly.
Excellent.
Still, you may go back to, Elliot may go back to his subordinate, colleague, who will give a very, in a confident way, that answer. He may call 7 more phone calls between Germany to Australia to New Zealand to get all the answers for him to process that one. Still, he may not give up that, Elliot, I get it. But once he starts believing in this, then he stops calling those 7, maybe you will call only 2 people. Okay, then finally he says, I'm not calling anybody because this system is telling me what all I need to know.
He's just cut down on your call log for the week. Look at how much time you just built back into your life. On a more serious note, I think that, these are great points that are being raised, and we are starting to get some questions in. So if you all don't mind, let's go on to the next section, if that's okay.
Okay.
So let's talk about how research sharing can be expanded. And it goes back to the conversation we were having a little bit earlier about that pre-commercialization stage. And what steps can technology be used to enable this process? I think we all know that some of these big diseases aren't going to get tackled if there's not some better collaboration. And it goes back to the premise that we started with, this neural network of clinical research. So I'm going to start with you, Elliot, this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably one of the most important things is for pharma to realize that if we share data, we'll ultimately all be better off for it. And if we could figure out how best to share data and protect our proprietary aspects, but for example, you could easily share placebo data. We've contributed placebo data to Oxford, for example, to allow them to aggregate data. We also have an open policy in terms of collaboration with Yale, so that anybody from the outside world can ask for any of our data and we'll make that data available. So I think if more companies would participate in data sharing and we could form some consortia to aggregate data, you could answer questions in a better way. Now, real world data is available like that, but real world data doesn't always have the advantages of some of the harder endpoints or some of the randomization aspects. And so I think, but if we apply more AI to real world data, maybe we won't ultimately need that control data, but we could apply it in a broader perspective.
Interesting. And Jay, I don't want you to always feel like you're in the middle, so I'm going to tap your shoulder now.
No, I think it's interesting. I think for me, AI can be, as I mentioned, can be applied across. I like a little bit of a retro review as well. I think that one thing AI could really help drug development moving forward is looking past on why drugs have failed and where they failed, and really having a thorough understanding. Because every time we develop a drug, we start from a kind of a similar point and move forward without looking backward. And so, I'm working with a company right now that is doing AI, machine learning, and statistics and design analytics to look at all of the public data and all of the companies in oncology. And really, the approach is to apply all that to have a better probability of success targeting a particular cancer over another one. And so I think it can be used bi-directional, meaning learning from the past and then prospectively helping in real time manage projects, and then also guiding for the future. And I think Elliot hit upon the point, if more people shared some of the pros and some of the failures, we could all learn more efficiently.
That's exciting. There's some really exciting possibilities there. And you can see some clear benefits going forward. Sagar, I'm going to turn to you now and ask you the same question.
Sure. It's about research sharing. You talked about, what about collaboration? These are all good concepts. but we got to also see why those are not happening at the rate at which we want. I mean, Jay alluded to a technology companies somehow seem to have figured out, why can't we do that, right? So instead of thinking just about it at a very broad level, research sharing across organizations and boundaries and geographical entities, even take it within pharma itself, right? And I was reading one statistic that a data asset that is purchased by one department or a division is at most used only twice. And other departments and at other different point in time, they're buying the same data again and again. So it's not just sharing outside of the organization, even within the organizations, sharing across therapeutic areas, across studies. Everybody thinking that, hey, my study is very different. It's as if every study team is creating their own clinical CPUs, right? Think about it. 60 years back, when tech companies started expanding, everybody did not build their own CPUs. Instead, they relied on CPU built by Intel. And then they created what's called Intel Inside. It's a great marketing program, of course, but it's also a good technological innovation that HPs and IBMs and a bunch of companies use the same CPU, but still built, to Elliot's point, differentiating products, proprietary products. So two companies using same technology, a same shared technology doesn't mean they're not differentiated, right? So technology has proven that. So maybe those constructs are not available in pharma world. And that's what you're alluding to. The clinical neural network is a kind of is a conceptual framework to build that's such a chipset, if you will. I'm taking analogy from hardware, but are there equivalent chipsets, right? Wherein when I'm doing a new study, I don't start from scratch. I just embed that chipset and then surround it with my clinical study parameters, right? So once you do that, then research sharing within the organization, across boundaries, those things will be much easier. And that's what my response would be, Taren.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Clive, I'm going to turn to you.
Well, I love the comments that have been made, particularly from Elliot and Jay, in terms of sharing. And I too am a great admirer of the Yale group and Harlan Krumholtz's push on us as an industry to look to ourselves as to what we're really trying to hide and what we're not trying to hide. And I think it's been extremely positive, a little bit vulnerable sometimes, a little scary to explain it to your boss what you're about to do. But in fact, you know, an incredible initiative and a lot of courage shown by a lot of people like Elliot and Jay making it happen. Because I think it comes to a very central point of our work together, which is who owns the data really? And as we move to greater and greater consumer and patient centricity, we have to confess, and here again, Harlan's leading the way with Hugo, we have to confess that the data belongs to the patient or the subject. And in a way, they should have a word in who has the data. And it's my guess that if you asked a subject or a patient where they would like their randomized data to end up, they probably wouldn't say, I'd rather J&J had it than Amgen. They probably wouldn't say that. They'd say, I hope it ends up in the hands of very competent people. And both of those companies obviously have those people. Or Celgene, or now BMS as it is, you know, that the medical editors, when they started writing about this a few years ago and, you know, data accessibility, the one strong message came out was that we all want competent people to have data in their hands. That's the test. It's not proprietary in the sense of secret. It's proprietary in the sense that it's in the hands of people who know what to do with it wisely. And having a direct link between the patient, the subject, or the consumer, and those people, I think, is what we have to build towards. We're probably not there yet, but these steps that Elliot and Jay are describing and that Sagar and Suresh are enabling are really a big part of our future, and COVID has accelerated that too.
Excellent points. And Suresh, I'm going to leave it to you to take us home.
All right, thank you. I happen to agree with all my colleagues on the panel here on this. I think, look, industry came together maybe a couple of decades back with the concept of sharing the research data. It's not new. They have done it. That's how clinicaltrials.gov came into existence. And on a frequent basis, we update the stuff so that everyone, even my competition, knows on a daily basis my progress. They have done it, no question about it. Has it been done really well? That's questionable. We can always improve on it. Where I'm going with this is since that time, that's maybe early days of internet revolution when we did that. From that time to now, there has been a very incremental changes to the thinking process. Okay. Since that time, there has been a lot of progress made with computing infrastructure, then overall technologies, database technologies, user interfaces, some artificial intelligence, all these pieces. Maybe I'll give you one example here. When COVID-19 broke out, there has been a lot of effort by all sorts of scientists across the globe, publishing also big, highly scholarly articles on COVID-19. And there was an initiative that was started to aggregate all of this into one place called CORD, C-O-R-D. What was that about? Before we all knew, within few days to within a month or 45 days, we saw over 100,000 scholarly articles published on COVID-19. And creative minds at Saama, what they did was they jumped on it and they applied deep learning algorithms, machine learning algorithms on that COVID-19 code set. They call it CORD code set. And our clients were struggling to get started with their COVID-19 study programs. We were able to enable them with really important information, vital information about the investigators, about the sites, and about a bunch of things they were struggling to get started with. Okay, and all this came together, to be honest with you, in days. So this is another way of industry coming together, scholarly publications, and everyone is able to leverage that same data set of 150,000 scholarly articles produced across the world for this COVID-19. So what is the real need of the hour? Everyone agreed speed to save the humanity from this virus. Everyone, we were all on the same page. Okay. With that, I would like to end this, my section here, saying that, see, we genuinely envision a robust clinical neural network to evolve. That will become not only a foundational for all clinical studies, but also raising the bar for overall clinical development programs, like Jay and Elliot said earlier a little bit. How do we raise that bar for entire industry? That's what we envision to happen with every one of us joining hands and building this robust clinical neural network.
And if I could, Suresh, just
please.
One comment. What I have found, at least in the operational space, is exactly what you said. COVID's a great example. We don't know how to start. You already have the answer, but you can't even give it away for free, probably.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
So we're still talking a little bit of two different languages. And the question is, how do we get institutional knowledge to close the gap, to talk to tech companies, data companies, AI companies, where we understand what you're saying and have a faster uptake? I think there still is a language barrier between sponsors and what you guys can provide.
Yeah, I must say, my vocabulary has increased dramatically. I now know what fire means and all kinds of connectors.
You got rid of DOS.
And same here, Elliot. We can pass off as a study manager for reasonable amount of studies. So we understand, I mean, again, that this is actually a good merger that is happening between sciences and technologies, people, right? It's at people level, interconnecting, talking to each other, understanding. Let me tell you, our AI scientist or whatever is completely useless if they're not paired right now with some other domain experts that you are. I mean, we started seeing results only after we actually hired a bunch of people from pharma, actually. I mean, some of your ex-colleagues, we're fortunate that they joined us. The languages got merged together. Then the same technology that we're using completely took a different shape, right? So that merger of that marriage is very important.
Yeah,
that's absolutely the truth. You know, we've been working with a company, Enphase, which created RedCap Cloud, which is the most commonly academic database used worldwide. But there was a passion to bring the knowledge and the technology to the clinical development space. And it's just been an incredibly fruitful collaboration. And I'm hoping that that type of collaboration between the scientific community and the other, I don't know if we'll get married, but at least right now we're engaged, and that's okay.
As long as you're dating, at least then there's some communication going on.
Exactly.
That's all right. You know, it is the 2020s, so you don't have to get married to make it a fruitful union.
Exactly.
Elliot, all that I want to say is we want to have one voice rather than two voices.
Yeah.
If we can achieve that, I think we can make a lot of progress.
Yeah.
When the purpose is powerful enough, it does bring us all together remarkably, and I think we're seeing that now. And hopefully that momentum can continue, that sense of collaboration. I will give you another historical vignette, Taren, which is the way that in the 1600s we learned how to navigate longitude as well as latitude, an incredibly important economic benefit for mankind to know where your ship was and where it wasn't. That was based on astronomy, which you could argue was a science. It was based on telescopes, which was certainly engineered. It was based upon clockmakers who were clearly engineers, and navigators and entrepreneurs all coming together and figuring that out and really transforming our understanding of in a new mercantile economy of how to operate. And medicine is a little bit late, but we're getting there, and things like COVID force the pace and force you to cross these boundaries together and work on a common purpose. So I'm extremely optimistic about these chances, and with Suresh's company and others, you know, working with, particularly with big pharma as well, I think it's going to go a long way very quickly.
Not to push the analogy too far, but if we could think of patients as all of our true north, then we are heading in the right direction.
Surely.
Agreed.
Excellent. Yeah. I can't tell you, I can't thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all the questions. We will we'll catalog these, and we can send them out in an FAQ in advance or after this, we're done with the 24 hours. But this has been extremely illuminating, and I know the response has been great in the chats and some of the questions that we've received. So my enduring thanks to all of you for being part of this panel. It's so interesting to hear the different minds come together. And, you know, as you said, we may not get married, but we're certainly on the dating path, which I think is fantastic. You know, since we couldn't get to all your questions, but I do want you to continue to engage with our thought leaders, and you can continue the conversation on Twitter using hashtag PharmaVoice100. And your Twitter handles are on the speaker tab at PharmaVoice100.com.
For more PharmaVoice 100 content, visit www.pharmavoice100.com.